Are Muslim ninjas coming to ruin your Easter Sunday? I can't believe we're going to talk about this.
It could happen.
Peach Pundit, the podcast, is a conversation filled with the personal opinions of the people who are participating. Any view or opinion expressed belongs only to the person who expressed it and not with anyone with whom that person is professionally affiliated.
Welcome back to a special weekend edition of Peach Pundit, the podcast. My name is Scott Turner. That is Buzz Brockway.
Howdy.
I'm gonna save the whole "how you doing, Buzz" because we talked about it. We're both tired.
Yes.
We're recording on Saturday afternoon. We couldn't even get ourselves to record in the morning because I was too tired.
If the legislature would just pass the bills that we want, we could go home earlier.
Right.
We wouldn't have to wait around to see.
I had an interesting thing happen for the first time. I've been going to the Capitol. I think first time I started going to Capitol was around 2009, 2010. So it's been over 15 years I've been going to the Capitol. And for the very first time, a bill that I wanted to pass, I was told was not coming out of rules when I asked. Like straight up, is this coming or not? Right. Every time I've ever asked that question, I've been told, I don't know, we'll see. And it was the very first time, no, that one's not coming. We're just too busy. We have too many things going on, which changed my mood dramatically, not for the worse, for the better.
Now right?
Yeah. I mean, all the anxiety was gone from the night. Like, okay, I am now just an observer, or I'm just a passenger on this roller coaster called Crossover Day.
Right.
I don't have to worry about it. And it doesn't mean my bill's not going to pass into law, because just because my bill doesn't get out of rules doesn't mean I'm not getting it onto something else. So still going to work on it. But Crossover Day was yesterday. It ended for the House at about 1 a.m. One of the last bills of the night was Martin Montahan's SNAP bill, which is probably one of the more important ones. So I've asked Representative Montahan, we're not going to go on the podcast, but I asked Representative Montahan this morning if he'd write an op-ed explaining why it's so important. I think it's vitally important that his bill pass. But what were some of the other things that you were surprised with? Just quick takeaways from Crossover Day.
Well, I think we'll dig in a little bit more, but as I was told what happened, the House came back on late in the evening with a property tax bill, and we'll dig in a little bit to it. It's a big bill. I haven't read the entire thing, but there are a couple highlights of note. But so the House got one of their big priorities moving, maybe not to the full extent that they wanted, but property tax reform is still alive and on the table. Yeah.
So when we come back, also qualifying finished up yesterday. So we're going to dig into some of those numbers and why we think the media narrative this morning has totally missed the real narrative, what's actually happening here. So Stay tuned.
Peach Pundit has an anonymous Patreon who would like to invite you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. No one should fight Alzheimer's alone. With your help, no one will. Learn more on their website, alz.org.
Americans for Prosperity Georgia is out in communities across the state celebrating the policy wins of the last several years and casting a vision for what the future holds. Visit peachstateplaybook.org to learn more about the game plan for freedom and prosperity. Because to win, you have to call the right plays. Thank you to our friends at Americans for Prosperity for being a partner level Patreon. Being a Patreon is completely free, but it's how we keep the lights on here at the podcast. If you want to join the people who rock, you can head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit. Sign up for any one of our tiers starting at just $5. Yesterday, we had a very interesting Signal Chat contest where I asked all the members in the Signal Chat to predict what time the Senate would be adjourning. And the person who was closest was Ryan Purvis, who got himself a hat. He had predicted 9:51. The Senate adjourned at 10:45. And by 7 a.m., I had texted at least 3 members of the Senate asking them if there were any truth to the rumors that they had already adjourned at 7 a.m.
Scott woke up yesterday morning in a feisty mood, shall we say?
I really was. I really was. And there's one particular topic on the agenda that we'll get to later that I will share with you which one of these agenda items caused me to
let's
wake up
provide a
wanting to
little
fight.
context about why you gave away a hat for predicting when the Senate would adjourn, right? Because
Sure.
earlier in the week, what was it, Tuesday?
Yeah.
Tuesday? The Senate left, 5?
Yeah,
5
it was
p.m.?
Yeah, it was pretty early.
Look, you can leave anytime you want, but normally the crossover day and the legislative day before crossover day are long days.
Yes.
So it was a kind of a surprise to everybody in the building, including senators themselves, that the lieutenant governor chose to adjourn before 5 p.m. on the last legislative day before crossover day.
He adjourned before 10 p.m. What was it, like 9:30 on Sine Die last year?
Yeah.
Much to the chagrin of many of the members of the House.
And probably the Senate, too. I mean, if
Yeah.
your bill's alive and hasn't been voted on, you don't want to adjourn.
So that was why the joke and why we were running the little poll. They did adjourn earlier. The House went to 1 a.m.
Yeah. Now, in fairness to the Senate, on crossover day, there are only 56 senators. They therefore they generate fewer bills. It's possible that last night they had voted on all the bills that they wanted to vote on, and of course they don't do supplemental rules calendars. They did have a large number of bills. By adjourning early, I think there were 11 bills carried over from Tuesday to Friday, day 27 to day 28, and then they added something like 35 more. So they had I think, well, maybe I'm wrong, my math, but I think close to 57 bills, I think, that were, including some that were on the table, etc. So they had a lot of bills.
It's not like they weren't working.
Yes,
they were working. They just have fewer number of members and therefore a fewer number of pieces of legislation that have to get out. So
but they did adjourn kind of surprisingly early on day 27.
Right.
So.
But if they adjourn Sine Die before midnight this year, I do believe there will be House members endorsing Republican candidates for governor not named Burt Jones. So he can do that at his own risk. But we woke up this morning after qualifying ended yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday, qualifying ended at noon. We have been posting, and I promise I will post the full list of people who qualified for the legislature today. I'll get to that today. I just didn't have the energy or the time to do it yesterday because I was at the Capitol until almost 11 p.m. and ended up going to bed after the House adjourned last night, watching the rest of the debate in the House. So we will post that. But there were 204 Democrats who qualified for office, which has the media in a tizzy this morning. They're like, oh, look at all this momentum and all this fervor and all this energy from the Democrats. Do you buy that, Buzz?
Not quite. I mean, look, 204 candidates, that's a lot of candidates. Looking at the Democrats' tweet, they claim it's a record-shattering number and a sign of their momentum. So I dug through some numbers, Scott, if you want me to break it down now. Okay,
I do.
So let's first look at the number of incumbents running unopposed. And it is a smaller number than you might expect, right? Senate Republicans, there's 7 of the, I guess, 32 now at the moment, because there's an open seat. 32 Republicans are unopposed, but only 2 of the Senate Democrats are unopposed. And this is a theme coming through, right? Mm-hmm. 20 House Republicans are unopposed. 26 House Democrats are unopposed. All right?
Sure.
Now, let's look at the number of primaries that exist. And this is what's interesting to me, okay? 5 Senate Republicans have primaries. 10 Senate Democrats have primaries. Again, another theme. 14 House Republicans have primaries, but a whopping 20 of their, how many? There are, 79 Democrats or so? 20 of them face primaries. Okay, so that's an interesting theme there. There's a heck of a lot of primaries. So among this, as the Democrats,
30 races, and some of those primaries have multiple Democrats running in them.
There are.
not just 2, but 3.
Yes.
Right. So over 30 races for the Dems at this point have primaries.
Yes.
So of those 204 candidates that we mentioned earlier,
yeah,
a lot of them are going to lose in the primaries to another
and
Dem.
also open seats. There are 11 open seats in the Senate, 19 open seats in the House. That's a lot of open seats. No surprise there. We knew all sorts of people were running for higher office. So, yes, there are, on paper, Democrats have recruited enough candidates to challenge Republicans to overtake both chambers. But we all know there's only a handful. I don't know that there's any swing seat in the Senate.
No.
And there are
they're
only a
all
handful
safe
of swing
red blue
seats in
seats
the House. So I think, I'm going to write a post eventually. I'm going to look at what I want to look at is of all these candidates running, how many are, because there are Republicans, 59 House Republicans and 15 Senate Republicans who face general election challenges. Okay.
Right.
On paper, that's enough to flip it. How many of them are in seats where the margin, where the incumbent is expected to get over 60% of the vote or even over 55% of the vote?
Right.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
No. Yeah.
So yes, it would take, I guess the bottom line is, it would take an unprecedented Democratic wave at the ballot box in November to flip these two chambers. And if that happens, all right, then John Ossoff wins by 10 points. Keisha Lance Bottoms is governor of Georgia, and on trickle on down. So they might make gains.
I would go so far as to say this, though. I would take it a step further, right? It's not only overinflating the meaning of the 204 candidates, but based on what we saw and all the different puzzle pieces moving around at the very last minute this week.
Yeah.
I would go so far as to say the Democrats in Georgia are in chaos.
Yeah.
Absolute chaos.
A lot of flipping around.
Right. Nabila Islam Parks was going to be running for insurance commissioner. She dropped out of that race at the last minute in order to run for lieutenant governor. We saw
which is interesting because with
Seth Clark.
Seth Clark dropped out. He raised a decent amount of money.
Right.
That kind of meant that Josh McLaurin was, coasting to that nomination. Not anymore. Now Nabila Islam Parks is going to be in there, and whatever you can say about her, she's a fighter.
Sure.
She will wage war on Josh McLaurin, I promise you.
So that will be interesting to watch because that happened at the very last minute. So that opened up that House seat. We talked about last week how State Representative Rua Roman had decided to not run for governor at the very last minute. Mm-hmm. And then she announced she's going to run for the Senate seat that's previously or has been held by Senator Parks.
Right.
But you heard some things about that. You talked about at lunch yesterday. I want you to share with our audience what you're hearing.
So it's I need to track down the names and stuff. She had endorsed a candidate, I believe, in the 7th, and then had attempted to set things up so that she anointed her successor in her own House seat. That's all kind of fallen apart, and candidates in that race are endorsing each other, and kind of in response to her coming back to the race. And the other Democrats in the 7th district race have said, "Hey, our district is not a consolation prize. We deserve a senator rather, who actually wants to be here and isn't just running off at the drop of a hat to do all sorts of things." So I don't know that she's, in other words, people are not exactly stepping aside so that she can just grab herself a spot in the Senate. So we'll see how that all plays out. She might very well win. She's got more name ID than these others, but it's not going to be just a coronation, so to speak. And that's my Senate district. So I'm kind of watching with interest. There's a Republican who qualified for that seat as well. But it's a 55% Democrat district. So,
also further evidence of chaos among the Dems at the very last minute, Wednesday, fairly close to being late. we got an announcement that Elena Parent, a state's
did you say Wednesday? Thursday night.
Thursday. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Misspoke there. Thursday, the day before qualifying closed, we got word that Senator Elena Parent, who serves as the caucus chairperson of the minority caucus in the Senate, has been serving. She was a House rep. She was out for a while. She became state senator, elevated leadership. She decides she's going to retire and not seek reelection. Up steps State Representative Cyber Draper.
Within minutes.
Well, it was planned because earlier in the week, Representative Draper had announced that she would not be seeking reelection for the House, but she'd be running for some other office, which created a ton of speculation.
Yeah.
People were like, is she going to get in the Secretary of State's race? Is she going to run for LG? At that point, Senator Parks had not announced that she was no longer going to be running for insurance commissioner.
Right.
And so there was a lot of speculation, and Cyber Draper would not tell me what she was running for. Her prerogative. I told her, well, I can wait.
We can break news for her.
Yeah, it's just Friday. Right. But by Thursday, we knew. We knew Thursday that she was going to be running to replace Elena Parent. And so there is another Democrat who is running for the seat to replace Elena Parent. She had previously announced. What was her name again, Buzz?
Nadine
Thomas. Nadine Thomas was a House rep back in the day. She also served in the state Senate back in the day. She served when the Democrats were in the majority as well. So she was pretty high up at the time when she was in the House. She was vice chair of rules.
Right.
I guess that would have been under Calvin Smyre back in those days.
Probably.
So there is that will be a contested race against somebody who has really become a rising star within the Democratic Party here in Georgia. It's Representative Draper, and somebody who's been around Democratic politics in Georgia for a longer time.
Yep.
So we'll see how that plays out. But here we go. That's the whole thing about the Dems. All this last minute motion and commotion really gave
one more we should mention.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ed Harbison.
Right.
Long time senator.
30 years, right? Over 30 years?
Yes. And
his son.
David Lucas kind of let the cat out of the bag, maybe too early, by recognizing him in the Senate. And I think everybody's kind of like, shh, what are you talking about? Don't tell nobody. So, because his son qualified, but also Teddy Reese, a House member, I believe a freshman House member, jumped into that race too. So creating an open seat in the Senate, which, again, all of these
in the House,
all included in the massive 204 number of Democrats running is all this happened and that happened and boom, 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 boom. And when the dust settles, it's, good for them for recruiting all kind of candidates because that generates an enormous number of qualifying fees, which they feed back into the party. Good for them. They're not going to be running the House and the Senate come January 2020.
Here's the thing that has come up in my mind over the last several days, because this has happened. It happened last year. We had a Republican Senate seat change hands because the incumbent decided to not run and didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
And then somebody of their choosing was nominated. Now that was a contested race because somebody went down, and you can go back and watch previous editions of the podcast if you want to learn more about that. But we've seen that happen. There was a time when Jay Powell, who is no longer with us, but Jay Powell got his state House seat because the incumbent decided the last minute not to, and he was the only one there. So
Steve Gooch was the beneficiary of
that
sort of thing. Yeah.
I didn't realize that. So
Chip Pearson was his senator and showed up at a few minutes before the qualifying close with Gooch in hand to watch him qualify and announce that he wasn't running again.
Do we need qualifying reform?
There's been a number of attempts, right? Isn't it the current law that?
Yes, I know what you're talking about. I know the law.
I forget the exact parameters, but
I do. I got it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, the way it works today, because this is the Jay Powell rule, right? After Jay Powell did this with his predecessor, who decided not to run, actually had qualified to run.
Yeah, that's right.
And on the last day, Jay Powell qualified, and then the incumbent withdrew, leaving only Jay Powell in the seat.
Yeah.
So after that, they did reform qualifying, saying that if the incumbent withdraws during qualifying week, then they must reopen qualifying for another 5 days of qualifying just for that seat.
Yes.
So we have had that type of reform in the past, and that is the Jay Powell rule. It happened because of him.
Right.
And again, he's no longer with us, and I had a great amount of respect for
Absolutely.
Jay. He
awesome
treated me
guy, awesome legislator.
He treated me very, very well in our time that we
Rest
spent
his soul.
together.
God rest his soul.
Yes, he was actually a great man. That being said, do we need reform? Do we need further reform?
Yes.
I think we do. I really do.
I mean, I guess there's probably no way to completely stop these sorts of incumbents anointing their successor and kind of more or less rigging the elections, if we want to use that term. So I don't know. There's probably no way to completely eliminate it, but there sure seems a lot of games being played.
Look, I think if you're an incumbent, you need to qualify on day 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Day 1 or 2. And if you don't qualify on day 1 or 2, so sorry. You had the opportunity. You're in the building during qualifying because it's legislative days these days. You have no excuse to not do that.
Yeah.
The first 1 or 2 days. And if you don't, then you're out. And that leaves Wednesday, Thursday, and the rest of Friday, the half day on Friday, to find somebody else.
Yeah.
If you're not going to do it, and gives everybody in the community time to sort of react. And maybe there was somebody who was just waiting their turn. If this is an uncontested seat, I'd like to take a shot at it. I don't want to challenge my incumbent. I like my incumbent, but if he or she should step away, I would like a shot.
Look, these seats are not, hereditary is not the, they're not, these aren't kings who.
Nobody's entitled to a legislative seat. And just because they're friends with the incumbent doesn't mean that they have some sort of advantage of having insider knowledge that nobody else has.
Right.
And you got to give people time. You can't wake up on Friday morning and decide, you know what, just because there's only one person in the race, I'm going to go alter my complete and total life for the next several months.
Yeah.
And put my name on the ballot.
That happened to me. I qualified. I got word, if I believe correctly, Tuesday night that my incumbent, Mike Cohen, was not going to seek re-election. I went down Wednesday morning and qualified. And a young man qualified at like 11:45 on Friday. Now, it wasn't a handoff. Representative Cohen did not, he announced as soon as he got an appointment from Governor Perdue at the time to a state office. He did not, anoint anybody. I got a heads up, not from him. Well, no, actually from him, yeah. Because I'd asked him, I heard the rumor that he might get this appointment. And he said, well, wait and see. So a young man qualified, and the whole reason he qualified, he was a nice guy, and he ran his race, and I won fair and square. But, he said, look, I just didn't think it was right that somebody should just
walk into it.
Son in there without an opposition. So
that's
off to him. Jesse Jones was his name. Pretty cool name.
That sounds like a cool dude, too, if he was that chill about it.
Yeah.
When we come back, we're going to talk about Greg Dolezal, and for a couple of different reasons, because he made news in a couple of different ways this week.
Yes.
Golden Retriever Rescue of Atlanta, GRRA, is an all-volunteer, tax-deductible charitable organization. They are dedicated to providing veterinary care, comprehensive evaluation, and foster and adoptive homes to golden and Labrador retrievers who are abandoned, mistreated, neglected, or left in shelters throughout Georgia. We encourage you to visit their website grra.com and help connect people and dogs that need each other in their lives. You truly can make this world a better place by helping find homes of gold for these golden-hearted pups.
Last night, you and I, we retreated outside of the Gold Dome, and we went to a legislative office that I call my hiding place. It was just far more comfortable. There's a couch, a couple chairs in there, big screen TV. And we sat down to watch the debate around Greg Dolezal's election bill. And I guess before I get to the election bill, he had a previous measure during the day. It was a constitutional amendment, which would require 2/3 of the chamber to vote in favor of it.
Yeah.
clarifying the state constitution. The state constitution says that only citizens get to vote in our elections. It already says that, but it further clarifies that only citizens would vote if it's possible to further clarify the current language.
Yep.
And it added a photo ID in order to vote requirement into the state constitution. Obviously, the Republicans do not have a supermajority in the state Senate, so no Democrat was voting for that bill. That resolution failed on the floor of the Senate.
Right.
Not entirely unexpected. So to me, not as newsworthy as his election bill, which he had brought fairly recently. It was only in the hopper for a few days. It got a hearing, moved the rules rapidly, moved to the floor. Now, to set this up, you got to back up to a couple of years ago. State Senator Max Burns passed a piece of legislation that I really liked because I said, and I actually testified in favor of it in the House. It was SB 189, and I teased the committee saying, can we rename it the Scott Turner Was Right Act? Because it removed the QR code from tabulation of our ballots. Now, that passed into law a couple years ago, but the effective date is July 1st of this year, so just a few months away. What has happened between that bill becoming law and today is nothing. The Senate and the House in Georgia have not passed any legislation to replace the current BMD voting machines. They have not done any. They have not lifted a finger, really. I mean, there was a bill that Max Burns, right.
Probably get to this.
I'll get to that.
Yep.
But so Max Burns did pass a bill on sine die last year, so it was not something that could be. It wasn't even read for the first time in the House until this year because it passed on sine die last year. It was SB 214, which was an attempt to try to do something about implementing 189. But even then, the House didn't have the time to do it last year. There has been a false narrative around the Secretary of State's role in this because Secretary of State has come to the legislature and said on a couple of different occasions, I need money. I need money. I need money. You need to appropriate funds in order for me to go out and find something. And the legislature never did that. Ask me how I know. Because last year, in 2025's legislative session, I was asking both appropriations chairmen, would you please put money in the budget? I did that. I asked. But also the Secretary of State had gone to budget hearings and asked for money in order to be compliant with SB 189. Mm-hmm. So without funding and without any legislative guidance, the Secretary of State is not a lawmaker, cannot make law, nor can he appropriate funds. The appropriators are the legislature, and the legislature did neither of those things. And they've left it hanging out there. Now, in the House, they have been feverishly trying to work on this. And in conjunction, I've been told there have been many, 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 many negotiations between the House and the Senate on trying to find a bill this year. And the House was really trying to work fast initially, but they could never get any type of real bicameral agreement between the two chambers on what the solution was going to look like. So last week, enter Greg Dolezal. He brings forth the bill. The bones of the bill are fairly good. It has problems. I'm not going to sugarcoat the problems. I'll tell you about the problems. But the bones are good. It's a hand-marked paper ballot. Now, this is where I tell you, Buzz, I'm going to ask you actually to verify this because one of our own bloggers doubts the veracity of my claims about my role in the hand-marked paper ballot debate. Roughly, how long have you been hearing me say that we need hand-marked paper ballots in Georgia? Roughly.
As long as I've known you.
Thank you.
Which is to say, shortly, the moment you got elected, we started hearing about it. Right. And there was no hand-marked paper ballot effort going on in the legislature when I showed up. There was no interest at all in moving away from the debold machines. I show up and I start talking about it. Well, let me add a little flavor to that. There was interest in moving away from the old machines that we had, the touchscreens that were not ballot marking devices. Because I was on government affairs at the time, I was in a number of hearings. We heard over and over from local elections officials, these things are old, they're wearing out. They were having to buy them off of eBay for spare parts, and they were concerns about the ability to adequately conduct an election on those machines. So momentum was building that we have to do something different.
Right. And I came up with a solution. My initial pass at it was something called VVPAT, which is a paper receipt type of thing where you see your ballot on a piece of paper,
Yep.
and then you press the button, and you never touch the paper; it zips up.
Yeah.
And I learned after I dropped that bill even more about why that's a bad system.
Yeah.
And so I became right around 2016, 2017, 10 years ago. I started really advocating for the hand-marked paper ballot. It was so important to me that we have a hand-marked paper ballot that when HB 316 passed in 2018, I was the only Republican in either chamber to vote against the bill. The only one in either chamber. Now, the blogger on our site said, I joined with the Democrats. Well, that's not the first person to ever say that. What I was doing was advocating for the thing I thought was the best solution. And at the time, I said, if we allow for 100% ballot marking devices, there are going to be enough people screaming and yelling that it's going to create confusion and doubt in the results, no matter what we do on the back end. But we have, and that's why I am so energetic in my enthusiasm for risk limiting audits, because the RLA is what allows us to take the paper and verify that the machine count was correct. Right. Doing that step is vital. We heard testimony in one of the committees that I was in a decade ago where a computer scientist said, if you have paper ballots and you don't do anything with them, there's no point in having paper ballots. So having some way of checking and verifying was critical.
And when I ran for Secretary of State, I campaigned on that. I wanted that. You and I were in total agreement on that, because every industry in the world who manufactures things does quality control. There's a whole industry of how you do quality control, and risk limiting audits are a form of quality control.
I set this up because the biggest issue with Greg Dolezal's election bill was that it kept the July 1st, 2026, just a few months away from today, as the effective date for making this change. Again, there's nobody who wants this worse than me. There may be others who want it as much as me, but nobody wants it worse than me. And I'm telling you, it cannot be done by July 1st.
Right.
It cannot be done. I have spoken to dozens and dozens of local election officials. I've asked them, what would it take for you to have a hand-marked paper ballot with an optical scan, which is what Greg Dolezal's bill would do. What would it take for you to do that? And the two biggest things they need is money and time. This cannot be rushed. We are in the middle of an election year. The primaries will be done on our BMDs. And then you're expecting them, and there'll be runoffs out of those races. So July 1st, this is supposed to be in place. Our elections for our primaries aren't going to be over until June.
Right.
So how are you possibly going to expect this group of county election officials to put something in place responsibly by July 1st?
Right.
It cannot be done.
Because our larger counties have larger election staff. They're not sitting around twiddling their thumbs. Okay. The elections offices operate lean. As election approaches, they staff up, and then they go back to being lean again. So there's not just all these people sitting around doing nothing who you can say, well, have them do it. That's not how it works. So again, it gets back to money. Sure, you can overcome that. And as you were pointing out last night, the closer you are to the election, the more expensive it becomes.
Yes.
If you want to make these sorts of changes.
There's the old adage, you can do things fast, you can do things cheap, you can do things well, but you have to pick two of them.
Right.
You don't get all three.
Right.
If you want to do it well and fast, you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay a lot more for it than you would have otherwise.
Right.
If you want it cheap and done well, it's not going to happen fast.
Right.
You have to pick two. And I was yelling at the TV during the debate because of all the different questions. Like we were watching a football game.
I can confirm that.
Yeah, I was literally yelling at the TV, like, guys. But then there was the shining light of reason down upon State Senator Ed Setzler, when he was like, my biggest problem is the start date.
Yeah.
And there are other issues with the bill. You can go and read it for yourself. It's out there.
I mean, look, there's some things I'm a fan of in the bill, things I'm not a fan of in the bill.
Yes.
I didn't like the I mean, look, you know where I stand. I'm a fan of the ballot marking devices because I think they give you the best of both worlds. You know, you and I disagree on that because they produce a piece of paper that you can look at.
Yes.
My concern always with hand marked paper ballots is you have to define, and Senator Dolezal's bill did not. You need to define what a mark means and exactly what a mark means. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting things out in court over scribbles and all sorts of silly things that
Dots,
people are going to do.
circles, X's.
Yes. You're going to be asking judges to interpret the intent of voter with all sorts of extraneous marks. Ballot marking device, you don't have to worry about that. There it is. You look at it and you go.
Yeah.
If y'all want to remove the QR code, fine. Remove the QR code.
I would counter your point by looking at our 2020 election where there were millions of hand-marked paper ballots and these issues did not stall or create the chaos.
You had all sorts of other issues. Then
you had other issues. Yeah.
Conspiracy theories covering all.
Yeah. You had other issues.
Right.
But the hand-marked paper ballots were not the primary source of the issues. They were human error in most cases, which is another reason why you cannot rush this. You've got to give them time to train. You've got to give them time to implement. You got to give them time to be ready. The midterms are too important of an election in order to have something new like this just thrown at them.
Right.
The other big issue with the bill is that it uses pre-printed paper ballots. Now, there are security concerns with pre-printed paper ballots because you have a big stack of them there. And you won't know that somebody didn't just take a whole stack of them and fill them out they wanted to and put them in the box.
Run out, and what if you do if you had too many?
Right. Well, I mean, if you there's supposed to be the exact number of ballots for every person who shows up, plus a bit of extra for in case people spoil their ballots for whatever reason.
You never have 100% turnout. Therefore, there's going to be ballots.
There's going to be extras, and you won't know that there is a problem until it's too late. Until a whole batch of ballots that are in a ballot box are ruined by nefarious ballots that have been filled out and dropped in. Ballot on demand printing is better for that particular reason. Senator Dolezal's bill is pre-printed. So there's another logistical challenge with that.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Because my favorite new conspiracy that our old pal, your pal, Rudy Giuliani concocted.
That's America's mayor to you, sir.
He said there was, and I had never heard this, in all the election conspiracies I had never heard, this was it right there. He said that he discovered in 2020 there was a ballot printing operation in a secret warehouse just down the street from State Farm Arena that was producing ballots that.
Sure.
Here we go. What are we going to do?
Sure.
Dolezal's bill. We're going to create a ballot producing warehouse just down the street from State Farm Arena. We're fulfilling Rudy's conspiracy.
Well, let me finish. I'll wrap up with this one last bit of criticism of Senator Dolezal's bill, which is the nature of logistics when you have pre-printed ballots. Republicans have been talking for years now, especially since SB 202, that we are making it easier to vote and harder to cheat. Part of making it easier to vote is today, because of the way our poll pads work and because your card is programmed with your ballot style, and this is important for people who may not know. If you go into your polling location, your ballot that you're voting on may not be the same as somebody who lives 2 or 3 miles from you because they're in a different county commission race, they're in a different state house race, or a different Senate race. Just because you vote at the same precinct doesn't mean everybody's ballot in that precinct is identical. There's things like I'm on the very edge of the city of Holly Springs. The people who live behind me don't get to vote in Holly Springs municipal elections. I do. They don't. Our properties touch each other.
Yep. Well, hey.
And we vote at the same voting precinct.
I am in Representative Sandy Donatucci's district. Literally across the street from me is Representative Sue Hong.
Right.
My
perfect example.
Across the street.
Right.
Has a different ballot than I do.
Perfect example of what I'm talking about. So if you have pre-printed ballots, when it comes to early voting, the bill will assign you to a specific early voting place so that your ballot style will be available to you at that place only. Now, there's been some data around, well, most people go to the one that's closest to their house. I will tell you that for me, that is not the case. I do not go to the one that's closest to my house. I go to the one that's on my way to where I'm going that day. I have 4 in Cherokee County I can pick from. If I find myself in Woodstock, I will vote at the one next to Woodstock. If I'm heading out to Hickory Flat, I will go to the one in Hickory Flat. If I just find myself in Town Lake, I'll go to the one in Town Lake. If I'm in Canton, I'll go to the one in Canton. I have voted in multiple early voting locations throughout our ability to vote early. And I typically do vote in person early, typically.
Yeah.
Very rarely do I actually wait until election day.
Yep.
And I've only voted by mail, I think, twice in my life.
Yeah.
Once was during COVID. So this, by assigning to a specific place, is demonstrably and objectively making it harder to vote.
Yep. Can I amplify that, Scott?
Go ahead.
I live in Gwinnett County, as you all know. The library on my street is an election day precinct. It is not. I am not allowed to vote there because mine is 2 miles away at Taylor Elementary School. Okay, but it is an early voting place because Gwinnett, in recent years, as early voting is advanced in-person voting, has gotten more and more popular. We have about 24, I think, early voting locations now. So the library down the street from me is an early voting location. There's also Bogan Park, which is just like 3 miles away from me, which is an early voting location. And there's another one, I can't remember the name of it. There's another one within like 3 or 4 miles of my house. So when I decide, hey, this is a good day for me to go vote, because I almost always vote early. I look at the helpful Gwinnett County website to determine which one has the shortest line.
Right.
I'm willing to drive 3 miles instead of the one that is a couple thousand feet from my house, literally half a mile from my house. If the line is longer 3 miles away than it is half a mile away.
Right.
So that's what I do. I shop because which one has the shortest line, depending upon the moment in time which I decide is a great time to go vote.
Right.
I probably wouldn't be able to do that under.
You would not.
I would not be able to do that under. And in fact, it might be because of how Gwinnett lines its precincts. I might have to drive 3 miles, and when there's literally a polling place half a mile from my house.
Right.
I'll be forced to.
It is demonstrably making it harder to vote. And even though the majority of the people may go to the one that's closest.
Technology is such that it's not a problem. With all due respect, I have a lot of respect for Greg Dolezal. That's a solution in search of a problem.
Right. Well, there's a better solution out there. Ballot on demand printing, both for the security and so that we can maintain our ability to go to any of the voting centers in the early voting period. It should be up to us as voters. If this is where I need to be, this is where I need to be. All right. More news from Greg Dolezal.
Well, I guess we should say that bill
failed.
Yes. Only one Republican voted against it. All the Democrats. There were, by that time, listen, there 33. But when the session started, you had 33 Republicans. Colton Moore ran off to go. Thank you, Marjorie Taylor Greene. So you're down to 32 because Colton Moore left, and there were, I forget the number, 3 or 4 Republicans.
Yeah, it was 27. You need 29 votes to pass a bill in the Senate, and they had 27.
Yeah, all
Republicans vote for it. And one Republican voting against it. Even if the Republican had voted for it, they still would not have had the votes because,
which is still not enough.
Right. It still would have lost because there were many members. By the time they called this bill, it was like 8, 9 o'clock when they called it, and some members had decided that they had other business that they needed to attend to.
Yeah,
which happens.
We don't know. Sometimes people get sick. Sometimes, Senator Sonia Halpern told me she was out of the Senate for several hours because her daughter was performing, singing a solo at a school function, and she was not going to miss that. And good for her. She should not miss that.
Right.
And so we don't know.
Legislators are real people that have families and real jobs and obligations that are beyond just being in the chamber every single moment. And before you criticize me for saying that or them for doing it, they're there the vast majority of their votes.
Right.
They're not like David Clark a couple years ago who missed 2 full months of the legislative session. That just is the outlier exception. Doesn't happen. So missing a few hours here and there to attend to family, to attend to business is a must because these people, it's not their full-time job.
Right.
They have to have some flexibility.
Frankly, in the case of Senator Halpern, that's a memory you never get back.
Yeah.
That you miss something, your daughter performing a solo performance.
Right.
You got one shot at that. there'll be plenty of bills.
Right.
Then, as we know, Scott, that very few bills fail by one vote.
It doesn't mean that the House and Senate are not going to still be able to address this just because this bill failed.
Right.
There are other vehicles, election bills out there that can be used, that have crossover, that can be used to address this. And I fully expect that the House will now take the role of adult in the room and begin working in earnest to present a solution and pass it out. It will likely, again, be a partisan issue, but which is weird because Democrats should be for hand-marked paper ballots. They've always been for hand-marked paper ballots. I hope that we do have some bipartisan cooperation with whatever the House comes up with.
Scott, can I go on a 45-second
I love it when you do.
idea? When I was running for Secretary of State, one of the things I learned was there are only a handful of companies in the world who manufacture voting machines of all the different kinds that we have talked about here. We have in the state of Georgia several of the top research institutions in the world. Okay, at Georgia Tech, and I'll throw in Georgia in there too. Okay,
I know that hurt you to say.
it hurt, yes, but we do have an expert at Georgia Tech, as you know, his name slipped my mind.
DeMillo.
Yes, Dr. DeMillo, who is an expert in election technology, right?
He is.
One of the things I wanted to do, if I had won as Secretary of State, I was going to approach the legislature to fund a research project where we work with Georgia and Emory and Georgia Georgia Tech and Georgia and Emory, and we develop our own freaking voting machines that we use here in the state of Georgia, and we make them impenetrable to all of the complaints that people have. Now, I'm not saying we incorporate every conspiracy theory out there. No, we develop cutting edge voting technology and that we employ in our elections that builds confidence with the voters and is easy to use and solves all these problems that we're all complaining about. That was my idea. And so I put that out there again. All these other folks, all kind of folks are running for Secretary of State, and folks like Senator Dolezal and other great folks in the House have all sorts of ideas about what to do to improve our elections. Why don't we develop our own?
I like this idea, and I'll add one more point to it. Today, state law requires us to have federal certification. The EA Election Assistance Commission has to certify whatever it is that we are using.
Yep.
That's according to state law. And that was part of HB 316, by the way. It doesn't have to be that way. States can and do. There are states that do not rely on federal certification. They have their own state level certification, which is allowable under federal law.
Yep.
States do this. We should be doing that now.
Yep.
We should no longer be relying on the feds because everything at the federal level is so hyper politicized. We should be using our tech folks here to develop our own certification process so that we can also be continually improving it and being more nimble when challenges and issues arise.
Because when I ran in 2018, blockchain was a new technology. There are people using, including one county in the state of Georgia, is using blockchain technology to secure their voter results and voting data. That's a technology that was not available. It was not widely known in 2018.
Sure.
Outside for application outside of creating Bitcoin. Blockchain is now being used in all sorts of things to secure data. And we won't go on a long rant about why that is the case, but that's a perfect application. Blockchain technology is a perfect application to use to secure elections. And why shouldn't we be on the cutting edge of deploying that and making elections in Georgia more secure than anywhere on the planet? We can do that.
So Senator Dolezal made news for other reasons this week.
He did.
And I'm going to, this actually pains me to talk about this.
Yes, it does.
I want to start by telling you the Greg Dolezal that I know is a good human being.
Yep.
He is a thoughtful person. He's a sincere person. He has genuine interest in your own well-being. If you talk to him, he's always going to ask you how your family's doing. And I don't think it's just the course of checking a box in the conversation. I think he's genuinely sincere in caring about you and how you're doing. And this is the Greg Dolezal I have known over the years.
Same here.
So it pains me to have to talk about this, but this is a Georgia politics podcast. And if we ignored it and didn't talk about it, it would look
we'd get letters. We get sternly worded letters.
I use this phrase probably too much, but it's absolutely true. We call balls and strikes here.
Yep.
And even when our friends are the batter or the pitcher, we're calling balls and strikes here.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that I hate Greg or dislike Greg or I'm angry at Greg, but I am sad and I am disgusted by Greg this week for an ad that he chose to run that featured what I told you at the top, what I am referring to as Muslim ninjas.
Yeah.
And it opens with a family celebrating Easter, having an Easter cake, and somebody who is obviously a Muslim terrorist barges in and takes a giant sword and slashes the happy Easter cake. And then it shows all of these images of Muslims shooting guns in the air, telling women they're not allowed to drive, and then saying, Greg Dolezal is fighting to keep Sharia law out of Georgia.
And a suicide bomber exploding?
Yes.
On somebody's front lawn?
On their front lawn, because that happens in suburban Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
It was in a suburban, like an Alpharetta neighborhood is what it looked like. Gosh, it was gross.
Yeah.
And honestly, it reeked of desperation. And it got him exactly what he wanted, because within 24 hours, I looked at the total number of views on that video. He had something like 300,000 to 400,000 views in 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about the polling in the lieutenant governor's race for governor for the GOP. And he's typically third, fourth right now out of the four big ones. And I don't include David Clark in the big four. The big four for me are Steve Gooch, not in no particular order. Steve Gooch, John Kennedy, Blake Tillery, and Greg Dolezal, all four of whom are serving in the Senate currently. Well, not John Kennedy, but we've talked about this as well, is when you're running against somebody with a name like John F. Kennedy,
yes,
and nobody knows any of these candidates down ballot,
right?
It's hard to break through. And so it felt like a super desperate way of grabbing attention that, honestly, I think the thing that disappointed me most is when I watch ads like that, I think the person who is running that ad doesn't think much of my own intelligence. And it hurts. But you made this point in the pre-roll about how Rick Jackson has gotten in, and how that dynamic may be partially responsible for this.
I mean, right, because Rick Jackson has sucked up all the ad time, right? And so what do you do if you are, look, lieutenant governor is just one spot down on the ballot from governor, but it's still down ballot. And when there's hardly any available ad space, and you've got all these candidates running for Senate, for governor, as you mentioned, a lot of great candidates running for lieutenant governor, on and on and on. How in the world are you going to break through and get attention? Well, you do something that goes viral, and that's what he did here. It hurt me too, because I, like you, I have great respect for Greg, and I have had encounters with him that I won't discuss, but on a personal level, where him showing incredible kindness for a friend in need. So I know that about him, and yeah, I agree with you, Scott. That was not the Greg Dolezal I know, that have come to know and come to respect, expressed in those ads. But here we are. And this is, I won't say, I don't think it's desperation in the sense of he thinks that he has to do this, that he's losing badly, because even all those polls still show enormous undecided voters.
Right.
I think desperation in the sense of, I have to get attention for my campaign, not because he's losing, but because the atmosphere is so full of Rick Jackson ads.
Yeah.
That you got to break through. And how do you break through? You create a viral moment, and he sure did that. He created a viral moment, no doubt about it.
I'll end it in somewhat. I'm sure Greg won't take it this way, but it's meant in humor. When I was a kid, my mom used to make cakes for Easter. You know, it didn't look like the cake at the beginning of the ad. That the cake at the beginning of the ad was just a pancake with the words "Happy Easter" written on them in icing.
Mm-hmm.
My mom would take 2 circle cake pans and she would cut one of them in half, and the 2 half pieces would serve as the bunny ears of that cake. And I just think Greg missed an opportunity to lean all the way in. Yeah, I just made Buzz super uncomfortable. And if you don't get that reference, you're probably better off. We're going to move on now because Brad Raffensperger showed up to qualify, and I had it on good authority from our favorite friends known as the goofballs, rejects, and a-holes that he was not allowed to qualify as a Republican to run for governor.
Yeah.
Yet, as promised, I was there. I live streamed it to Facebook. It was boring, just like it should have been.
Yeah, and that's partly me to blame because I said pictures or it's not real.
I said, well, I'll live stream it. And I did. I live streamed it from the moment he walked out of his office over to the qualifying. He walked in. His wife, Tricia, was with him. He had a couple of campaign aides with him. The folks were expecting him. When I say the folks, the Georgia Republican Party officials. The executive director of the party was the individual who actually took his paperwork and got him qualified. He walked over to the notary, had him notarized, and he was given a copy of his own documents. He came out and spoke to the press. You know who wasn't there?
Any representatives of the goofballs, rejects, and
yes,
holes?
You're correct. Not a single one. Nobody was there. And Alex Johnson of the GRA is out there saying, you know, the party has a First Amendment right to associate. I'm going to repeat this again. The party is not a group of no-betters. It's not a group of elitists who meet in smoke-filled back rooms to decide for the rest of us who is a Republican. The party is everybody who decides to vote in a Republican primary. Yep. It's the voters. We are the party, not a small little group of elitists who want to tell us what they know is best. That's not how America works. Right. That's not how the primary process works. And what they've tried to do there is not in accordance with state law. If you are trying to make a First Amendment claim that you, as a party official, have a First Amendment right to exclude people, you are excluding me because I am not a party official, but I am a Republican. I vote in Republican primaries. I donate to Republican candidates. I fight for conservative causes. There are goals I want to see accomplished. And there are things that I fight for, things like separation of powers, constitutional principles, our institutions, because they're worth fighting for. They're worth defending.
Yep.
That's what our party's supposed to be doing.
Yep.
We are the party. We, all of us. And just because we're not in your little smoke-filled back room cutting deals with people doesn't mean that you get to exclude us. Yep. You are violating my First Amendment rights, not only to association, but also to speech.
Yep. Now, there's a Facebook friend I have who lives up in that district who has been a frequent critic.
Up in that district, we were talking about Brad Raffensperger.
I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. Up in
Catoosa?
Northwest Georgia, up in the Catoosa, which is, they've tried all this kind of stuff, and have failed miserably, and have outstanding legal bills to show for it. But he said that he's been hearing that the GRA types are fomenting a lawsuit against this, claiming that because the Republican Party passed a resolution that Brad Raffensperger should be tossed off the ballot. And his statement, and I agree 100%, is bring it on. I would love to see that. That would be fun to watch that. And let them spend more money that they don't have in fighting this, this quixotic effort to defeat Brad Raffensperger, when all you have to do is go pick up a Republican ballot come primary time and vote for somebody else. That's all you have to do. If the majority of Republicans do not want Brad Raffensperger to be the nominee for governor, well, then there are other candidates in the race for them. But and
I want to be clear too. I'm at no point in time have you heard me say who I'm voting for or who I'm against.
Right. Same here.
And I think by now, I hope that all the candidates have been feel like they've been treated fairly by us. I was asked this week who I was voting for in the Secretary of State's race by a member of House leadership. And I said, I don't tell anybody in this building who I'm voting for.
It's a secret ballot.
It's a professional liability to tell people who I'm voting for at this point. I'm not going to, it doesn't matter who I'm voting for. Yeah, at the end of the day, what I told that member of leadership in the House is I always vote for the winner. Wink. Look, that's going to do it for the qualifying news. So let's move over to the policy side real fast, because you teased it at the beginning about the property tax thing. What do we know about?
Yeah, I've glanced briefly at the bill. There are a lot of things in the bill, but I think two things that are interesting that will probably, probably the guts of the bill is, number one, it caps local sales tax at 5%.
Sales tax or property tax?
Sales tax.
Oh, okay.
Local sales tax. And there's a long passage in there about lost, which is a form of sales tax which you can use to lower your property tax. Or is it most? Anyway,
there's lost, there's host, and there's most.
Host. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So, all right. So most would be a municipal option sales tax. All right. So it caps that because I think, as we talked about before, part of what they want to do is move people away from property tax, and how are you going to pay for local government? Well, you replace it with sales tax. So they're putting a cap on that. But then also, one other interesting thing that I thought was very interesting is it's going to cap property tax increases annually by 3%. So you cannot just jack up property taxes more than 3% in a year. I mean, part of the problem with the bizarre things about property taxes, you can, as a county official or a school board official, because they appraise the properties, if property values are increasing, you can say, well, we're going to look how awesome we are. We are not raising your taxes. We are going to keep the millage rate the same, but people's property tax still goes up because the value of your home goes up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an interesting thing, to cap that and say you can't increase more than 3% is going to be very interesting. And I think that will provide some property tax relief for people, and depending upon where they are, because if you're in an area that is growing and home values are rising dramatically, well, you can reap the benefit of the value of your home increasing because now your home's more valuable. You're not going to get hammered as much on your property taxes and it'll force local officials, school officials, and county officials to grapple with this and say, all right, a minute, you might actually have to cut the millage rate in order to keep under that 3% cap. So, I don't know, interesting. It passed with 98 votes. I think the constitutional amendment got 99 votes. So, obviously, there were some Democrats who voted for that. Well, maybe we'll have to dig in there and see. But it moves on to the Senate, and the debate is alive. So the Senate's version of addressing income tax is alive and passed over to the House, and the property tax that the House wants is moved over to the Senate, and we'll see how it plays out. I think we're going to do a little bit of both in the end. I think we're going to do a little bit of both.
So there's your property tax update. That was all required for the House to keep the debate alive because the constitutional amendment on Tuesday had failed a vote. And along party lines, the Democrats did lock down and vote no. They did honor their threats to have their caucus position. And without Democratic cooperation, you cannot get to 120.
Right.
So property tax relief had to go in this direction. It had to be just a general bill that only requires 91 votes. I'm going to pay off the tease now about why I was so grumpy when I woke up yesterday. I really don't like politicians who think I'm stupid, right? I mean, look, if you're going to think I'm stupid, you're going to have to provide the evidence. You're going to have to provide the evidence. I'm not saying I'm smart. I'm just saying that you're going to have to prove it to me and everybody else. And good luck with that, because as Buzz has pointed out several times, when I make a claim, I bring the receipts. Last week, Tricia Pridemore, the Public Service Commissioner, who announced fairly recently that she was not seeking re-election for the Public Service Commission, announced that she was going to run to be my congressman in the 11th Congressional District here in Georgia. And I read her announcement on Twitter, and I'm going to read one sentence from it that really spun me out. Quote, from Marietta to Calhoun, from Ball Ground to Jasper, our families want safe neighborhoods, affordable energy, secure borders, and a government that respects their hard work and their voice. Emphasis mine. I retweeted her. I said, I think of her every time I open my power bill. Hard pass. Well, Tricia decided she wanted to interact with me. And this is how it went. She responded, wow, sorry you feel that way. Georgia electricity rates are 15% below the national average. Read the facts at ferc.gov. I responded immediately. I feel that way because of decisions you made, Tricia. It's rich to talk about affordable energy in your release when my power bill is roughly 33% higher than it was in 2018. She responds, if your bill's gone up by a third over 8 years, you need an account review. That's not in line with increases for Georgia Power or Cobb MC. What? They're not. I responded, I am a Georgia Power customer. So I responded with the rates, kilowatts per hour rates. I just published the rates at this point. I didn't report my sources to her. My response to her was, you did this. In 2018, my rate was 11.65 cents per kilowatt hour. 19, it went up slightly, 11.66. Then in 2020, it went up to 12.38, then 13.22. In 2022, it was 15.2. In 2023, 14.63. Yay, a decrease. But by the very next year, in 2024, it went back up to 15 cents, 15.48, 15 and a half cents. It started at 11 and a half cents roughly. And now it's up to 15 and a half cents. That's 33%. For those who want to do the math, check me out. It's 32.9% increase, 33%. And I said, this is your record. She says, your numbers don't look right. What? My numbers don't look right. How does a sitting member of the Public Service Commission not know that those are the rates? She says, your numbers don't look right, but it's obvious you'd rather argue Democrat talking points. All right, the gloves are off now. Democrat talking points. What? I just put the data there. That's not a Democrat talking point. That is fact. And it's the reason why your two buddies, Tim Echols and Fitz Johnson, lost their elections last year. And it's why you decided not to run for Public Service Commission again, because that's what you did. You did that. You voted for that. Every single one of those rates, you voted to approve that. She says, bills increased in 21 through 24 due to record Democratic inflation, just like eggs, milk, gasoline. Mine did too, but I hate it. Blah, 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 blah. I said, you just want to dodge your record. If you could defend it, you would have run for PSC, but you know you'd lose. Southern Company just posted a $4 billion profit. Georgians got pummeled because of what you did. And then I actually posted the links to my source data, which, by the way, come from georgiapower.com. If you want to go see this Twitter thread, you can for yourself, because there's an image I want you to go see that I created at the very end. Her response to that was, LOL. Now, Scott, you and your buddies like these Democrat talkers. I don't regulate Southern Company and don't control their finances. I always thought you were smarter than falling for this. I really don't like it when politicians think I'm stupid. I really don't. So I said to her, you must think people are stupid. I'm going to really enjoy this campaign. You're running away from your record in an attempt to fail upward. Did you really think we wouldn't notice that the lady who voted for all those rate increases was running for Congress? I created a little image. You know that little image of that were on stickers of Joe Biden at gas pumps saying I did that? I got inspired. I took Fisher Pridemore's photo and I put it in the ChatGPT and I said, create a monthly power bill that's gone up 33% with I did that. So it's a political cartoon. I said, meanwhile, Georgia Power, a wholly owned subsidiary of Southern Company, LOL, has posted profit margins from 2022 of 15.65% In 23, 20.5%. In 24, 22.44%. And in 2025, 22.57%. They're doing okay. And you did that at our expense. And that's why I was grumpy when I woke up yesterday. You have anything you want to talk me down, Buzz? You want to, tell me I overreacted? You want to do all the things?
I'll just point out I don't live in the 11th congressional district.
There was another congressional race that has caught our attention this week because a late entrant to challenge Houston Gaines, who we had moved here to close nominations immediately upon him declaring that he would run.
Yeah.
A guy named Ryan Millsap. What do we know about Ryan Millsap?
I had not heard of him before, but apparently many folks have. He's apparently wealthy, Hollywood guy who's come and made money here in Georgia in the film industry, and kudos to him.
Thank you to the Georgia taxpayers for subsidizing his industry.
Yeah. But Scott, what's interesting about him, this comes from, I found this link on Tim Bryant's Facebook page. Tim lives out in that, as you guys know, radio dude.
Radio host.
Area.
Good conservative guy.
Yep. Apparently, this guy was involved in a lawsuit a couple years ago, business dispute of some sort, and as a result of that, information came to light that he, not fond of African Americans and Jews, and made fun of them and said insulting things and anti-Semitic and racist things in private text messages, and all this came to light in this lawsuit. And apparently, ProPublica obtained them and made them public, and so his response to that was more or less, "I'm sorry you were offended. These weren't intended for public viewing." But
I'm sorry I got caught.
Yeah,
is what that was.
Right. So there you have it. I think that provides some campaign fodder for opponents for Houston Gaines. I guess there's a third candidate. I'm sorry, I don't know the guy who else is in that race, but
doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
No, Houston Gaines is going to be the next congressman from that district.
And that'll be a good thing. You won't find, it would be the most shocking news of all time to me if you found anything similar to this in Houston Gaines' private conversations.
No.
It didn't happen.
Not going to happen. Not going to happen. I thought it was interesting that the week that Ryan Millsap decides to enter the congressional race with accusations that Houston Gaines is not a very effective lawmaker. Absolutely ridiculous, because everybody has heard by now who listens to this podcast about the Coleman-Baker Act. It was an effort that my organization worked very closely aligned with Houston Gaines to help solve cold case murders. And we had the Tara Baker case in Athens just a couple weeks ago, reach a verdict where they found her killer 25 years later, guilty of all charges. And just this week, yet another cold case because of the Coleman-Baker Act. On Tuesday, it was announced in Douglas County that a 16-year-old case had an arrest because of the work of Houston Gaines.
Awesome. One other thing I'll say about Houston that to me is emblematic of who he is and the kind of congressman he would be. He voted for the heartbeat bill a couple of years back when it passed. Now, you say, well, that's a bunch of Republicans did. Yes. He lives in a swing district.
But not all Republicans did.
Not all Republicans did. And he lives in a swing district.
And the Republicans who lived in swing districts at the time of that vote did not vote for it.
Yeah.
But he did.
Right. And why? Because there was never a doubt in his mind which way he was going to vote, because he felt it was the right thing to do. And I love politicians who say, I will vote the way I believe, and if I get sent home because of it, then so be it. And that's the kind of Representative Houston Gaines is. He's going to do what he thinks is the right thing to do. You might not always agree with him. There are votes that he has cast that I don't agree with, but I know that he's arrived at that decision in an honest way.
Correct.
That's what he thinks was the right thing to do. And if you want those kinds of people in Congress, then, well, you got a candidate there who will do that.
Right. And we don't need to California or Georgia. This guy, Ryan Millsap, has other skeletons in his closet where he has attacked conservative viewpoints and policies for the last decade.
Yeah.
And it's all on the record.
Right.
And
So
we
now
don't,
he's casting himself as a MAGA Republican. I'm bold. I'm strong. I'm blah, blah, blah. All this kind of, I fight, all this kind of crap. And what does he believe? We don't know what he believes because it's all over the map.
well,
And
it's
I'm tired of
all
those kind of politicians.
Yeah. And there's a record out there of
Right.
things he said in the past that are not conservative. They're not fighting for what the district wants,
Right.
what Republicans generally stand for. He's actually fought Republicans along the way. So I know he has said he's going to spend something like $4 million of his own money.
Yeah.
You know, this is America. You get to do whatever you want. If that's the way you want to spend your money, go spend it. At least it'll hopefully get back to the taxpayers who funded all the tax credits that made your business possible here over the years.
And he's going to have to do it to paper over his record.
Yeah. But you have a genuinely effective legislator in Houston Gaines who's done great things, like keeping local governments from defunding their police departments.
Yeah.
Fighting for Lake and Riley. Fighting for victims whose murders have gone unsolved for decades. He's done so many huge, really important, impactful things that are changing people's lives for the better. Yep. There was a reason. I wasn't kidding. When he announced, I said, let's close nominations now. Let's just go. Because he's that good. He really is. Like, he's one of the most impressive young people in politics, and he's still young. He's still young. That heartbeat bill vote, it could have ended his political career at a very young age. He would have been done. He would have been done at a very young age.
What the people in the district think. They may have disagreed with him on that. They respect that he's an honest guy who does his work well.
That's going to wrap the show. We had one more topic, but we're not going to. We're out of time. We're a bit over, so we're out of time. But I want to thank the people who rock. These are the people who reach into their pockets every single week or month, and just give us at least $5. That Signal chat that we talked about, you get access to that. You get to be part of the community. Yesterday was lit. I mean, we had all kinds of comments all over the place, and news and rumors. And if you're a Politico and you're listening to this podcast, why aren't you in that Signal chat? It only costs $5 a month. There are higher tiers too, and they'll give you additional benefits. But these are the people who rock. These are the people who actually do. Adam Pethel, Tony Weston, Friends of Americans for Prosperity, Amy Davis, several anonymous folks, including one who wants to know more about the Alzheimer's Association, Bethany Ballard, Bill Werkheiser, Bo Brandon, Brittany Ellison, Colin Martin, Daniel Shaver, Elizabeth Clare, Frank Russo, Gabe Hartwig, Jeff Cobble, Greer Howard, Hank Burnham, Harrison Edwards, Jacqueline Harn, James Hall, Jason Bankston, John Vestal, Jordan Reed, JT Marshburn, Ken Pullen, Kenyatta Mitchell, Lawton Sack, Mark Pettit, Mike Bucher, Reed Powell, Robert Lee, and our friends at Lee6 Media, Ron Daniel, Ryan Graham, Ryan Purvis, Sam Thomas, Sergio Ortega, Shannon Ferguson, Stuart Wilkinson, and Terry Fye. Thank you to each and every one of you for being a person who rocks. Again, if you want to be a patron, head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit. Sign up for one of those tiers. Like and subscribe. Tell a friend. Help us grow this thing, will you? I'm Scott Turner. That's Buzz Broccoli. All the music you hear is by Jason Pye. Thank you for listening to Peach Pundit.
Go Jackets.